Okay.
Hopefully it's not like it's chased back that has been with no single for 8 months.
Really?
Yeah, because the missing parts of the AC is not. They have like portable AC in there.
Is that local? Is that in our area?
And also 26.
Oh. Okay. Then we're going to start Daf Yotes. We'll start Montana. It's 4 lines down. Am I correct? So we'll start. Okay. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. First of all, learning, we should have Beis Hamikdash immediately. So we start like this. Montana Lahad Tana Rabbanan. Who's the author of the following brisa? Let's jump in and then I'll go back and explain the background. Isha Shenadra ben Nazir Benitma. A woman that took on a vow to become a Nazir, but then she became Tamei. Now, a woman, of course, can be a Nazira as well. So here she accepted on herself to be a Nazira, and then she became Tamei. Now she's married, and the husband is allowed to annul her vows. And then the husband annulled her vow. Now, what happens now? Officially, she has to bring sacrifices when she becomes pure, but the Nazirus just dropped because the husband annulled it. So the rule is mevia chatas ha'oif ve'ein mevia oilas ha'oif. Really 3 sacrifices. There's a chatas, an asham, and an oila. Chatas and the oila are both birds, and the asham is an animal. So we say that she only has to bring the chatas ha'oif, not the oila ha'oif. What happened to the asham? I guess that for sure not. Yeah. No, that wouldn't affect. Well, the question now is, who is the author of this price? Rav Chisda Rabbi Yishmael. Rav Chisda says it's the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Now, let's go back to discuss what the opinions were before. So we had the opinion of Rabbi, and in our Gemara it was actually Rabbi Eliezer, but we followed the Groz version. We said that it was Rabbi. That if a person is a Nazir and he becomes Tamei, after the 7 days, he immediately starts to recount, even if he doesn't bring the sacrifices yet. It says, Bayei Mahu. That day taught, on that day, what was the whole pasuk? The whole pasuk was, V'chidish Esreishe Bayei Mahu. He sanctifies, he consecrates his head, or the hair of his head. On that day, that means on, was it the 7th day or the 8th day, according to Rabbi?
If he was pure, he took the vow, and then he became impure, he does it
on the 8th day. It's the 8th day. Very good. On the 8th day, but he doesn't need to wait for the sacrifices. Then we had the opinion of the Chachamim that said that he needs to wait for he only starts counting after he brings the carbon chatas. Then we had the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael that says he has to wait for the chatas and the asham. We asked, what does Rabbi Yishmael do with the pasuk Bayei Mahu? So he said that's coming to exclude the oila, that you don't have to wait for the oila to restart the count. He said, why don't the Chachamim need Bayei Mahu? Why doesn't the Chachamim need Bayei Mahu to exclude the oila? They exclude the asham. So we said that according to the Chachamim, the oila is so far removed from this that you don't even need a pasuk to tell me that you don't have to wait for the oila. Why? Because the oila is just a gift. It's a present. It's not coming to atone. According to Rabbi Yishmael, the oila is coming to atone, and I need a pasuk to tell me that you don't have to wait for the oila to be brought. And so therefore the pasuk is necessary. But according to Rabbi Yishmael, I still have to wait for the chatas and for the asham. But what we're gaining over here, we know that you're not going to bring an asham because she's not a nazir anymore because the husband took away the vow. But should she bring an oila? Well, if the oila is a gift, then for sure she should bring the oila. And if the oila is not a gift, Ayla is part of the atonement, then you don't bring an Ayla if there's a doubt if you have to bring. A Chatas Ha'if has a special leniency that you can bring a Chatas Ha'if when there's a doubt. Okay, so that's what we're saying. And all of this is why do we say that it's Rabbi Yishmael? Why do you say it's Rabbi Yishmael? Because Rabbi Yishmael would be the opinion that says that the Ayla is not a gift.
This view of the Oila different from view and the rest of halakha of the Talmud? Because it's just, I don't understand this whole concept of to give. To give to something I choose to give, not something that I have an obligation.
Right. What is its function? Is this an atonement, or is this after the atonement, then you give a gift? What's the function of the Ayla? Yeah, so there's different views. One view is that it's an atonement. Another view is that it's a gift that comes after the atonement. According to Rabbi Yishmael, it's an atonement. So if that's the case, then I'm not going to bring this atonement in this case because it's not necessary. The question is, why do you have to bring a chatas? That the Gemara is going to ask in a minute. Okay. So Rav Chisda tells us, Rav Chisda was the one that was in the last few daf was telling us who says what. He was attributing brises to different Tanaim. Rav Chisda says over here it's Rabbi Yishmael. The Gemara asks, my kasavar, what does he hold? Ikasavar bal me'ekar akar. There's a question if when the husband uproots the vow, when he annuls the vow, does he uproot it from the beginning as if it was never made? Or does he just stop from where it is right now and it doesn't continue? That's a question. It's the way it's put in the Gemara is miyakar akar. Does he uproot it? If he uproots it, then chatasayif namilay laisi. Then why does she have to bring a chatasayif? It was never a vow that was ever made. It retroactively uprooted the Naziris. And I know she became tummy, but she was never a Naziris. So what's it? Because the husband took it away. Okay. Ikasavar, if you hold Baal Megas Gaius, that the husband just chops it off from now on, but not that it uproots it. In other words, she is a regular Nazira. The husband just said that you don't have to continue it. That's the case, then Chata Saif Namilay Laisi. I'm sorry, Oila Saif Namilaisi, then she should also bring the Oila Saif because she became impure and those were the sacrifices that were required. She should have to bring that as well. It's not retroactive. No, it's not the wording of the husband. There's a question. How effective is the husband when he says that he doesn't want the vow? Does it go retroactive or is it a from here and on? Okay. The Gemara says, Leilam kasavar bal mi'ekarakar. Really, the husband, he uproots it from the beginning. Not the way we view it later on, but that's what we're going to see now. The husband really uproots it retroactively. Rabbi Yishmael Savalak Rabbi Lazar Kapper. Now, even though it gets uprooted, which means that the vow was never made, but because the vow was made and it was taken away entirely, so we're going to follow the view of Rabbi Lazar Kapper, and she's going to have to bring a chatas.
If she violates the vow, not knowing that her husband had notified it, like she's still liable for that.
Right. Right.
So here she became impure while she was like, knowingly she was supposed to be pure. Maybe that's why.
It's not exactly what the Gemara is going to say. And what you're suggesting is that there's another detail in here. That she became impure. She became impure b'mezid. It doesn't have to be b'mezid. See, it could be she became impure b'shegeg. She was in a house and someone just died in the house. So it's not like she needs an atonement for thinking that the vow that she did, she ignored the vow on purpose. That what you're quoting is when she thinks the vow was not annulled when really it was annulled. And then she goes ahead and she violates it on purpose. So she intended to sin, even though it really wasn't a sin. She still needs atonement because of that intention.
So
Money.
it seems here to me that here the issue is whether the mere act of taking a vow of Nazir is a chait
Yeah,
in and of itself that
Right.
requires
exactly.
carbon. Is
Exactly.
that it?
Yeah. So, Savalak Rabbi Lazar Akapar. The Tanya was taught in a brayso. Rabbi Lazar Akapar, Berebi Yomer. I think that means the great. Is it Ben Berebi? What is it? How do they translate Berebi over there? Rabbi Lazar Akapar, Berebi. The esteemed. Esteemed. So he says, Matamud Laimar, what's the meaning of the verse? V'chipar alav meshachat al nefesh, that will atone for him that he sinned on the soul. What souls did he sin? When someone becomes a Nazir, he's committing a sin. What sin? That he is refraining from wine. Kal v'chaimer, and there's a kal v'chaimer here. The person that only says, I'm not going to drink wine, he's already a sinner. It's called a sinner. Someone that refrains, that he pains himself from everything. That means if he takes on other types of nidarim, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to eat this or that. So for sure, that's considered a sin. Yeah, this is following that view, that that logic that we quoted, I think, from Yerushalmi, that in the Dharam we had this. It's not enough what the Torah made prohibited. You have to go and make other things prohibited. So this is the idea that the world, we're supposed to refine the world, not separate from the world. We're supposed to use everything in the world for Kedusha, for holiness. Fast, right? Right, right, but not extra. Right. Today we don't do that either.
Was Esther first esteemed? Hakapar?
No, Hakapar was his name. Then after Hakapar it says Berebi. Now Berebi could either mean the son of Rebbe or it could mean the great. So here it means the great. So the Gemara says, 1 second. The pasuk that Rabbi Lazar Hakapar was quoting was when someone was a Nazir and became Tameh. So it says, Vaha, the Nazir Tameh. You're telling me that the sin that he did was when he became a Nazir. Now you're telling me that the sin that he did was when he became a Nazir and he became Tameh. But not if you're Nazir Tar Kamrinan. But you're telling me that it's even a sin just to become a Nazir in the first place. Gemara says, Kasavar Rabbi Lazar Kapar Nazir Tar Nami Chaytio. Rabbi Lazar Kapar holds that really every Nazir is considered a sinner. Why? He shouldn't have been accepted on himself that not to enjoy wine. Behind the time of the Ksiv Benazir Tameh. So why does it say? Why does the verse say Benazir Tameh that he's sinning? Because he repeated the sin. He repeat the sin because he became Tameh. He has to start it over.
Any Nazir that became Tameh is a sinner.
But really, he's really a sinner the first time.
When he didn't even violate anything.
Even just by becoming a Nazir. But then when he becomes Tameh, so it's sort of like we say, like, you shouldn't have done this in the first place, and now you're already doing it twice. So that's why he has to bring
isn't
the
it like a sign of, I don't know, like piety or righteousness.
Right. Guess you're not supposed to be so pious. Right. Not necessarily. Yeah, it depends on the situation, though. Right. Grape juice is fine. Yeah. My grandmother had this joke that,
No.
and, that this Jewish guy went to see the Pope. So after the visit, his friend said, "What did you talk to the Pope about?" "What do you mean?" I said, "Was is nice, pious."
He's pious.
That was the Pope
Pious.
pious.
Oh,
What's
pious.
nice means what's news.
Oh,
What's news? Okay.
What's the answer?
The answer, probably he answered in Yiddish. That's okay.
Nice.
News.
News.
What's news? It's a
Very disrespectful, huh?
from news, like blessed nice. Okay.
Yontif, Pontif.
That's the English version, right?
That's the Yiddish. That's what Yiddish, that's the Hebrew language. That code becomes Yontif.
Pontiff.
Okay. So here we have a Mishnah. We're going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that it's if someone was Tameh before he accepted on himself to be a Nazir. For example, he was in a cemetery and he says, while he's in the cemetery, he says, "I'm going to be a Nazir." So we say we only start the counting after he leaves the cemetery and becomes pure. Then the Mishnah goes on and says, if he leaves the cemetery and he comes back in, then those days is when it starts counting. And he has to bring a carbon for going back in the cemetery for becoming Tameh. Gemara says like this. When he leaves the cemetery and he enters back in, then those days are counted. Does all you need to do is just leave the cemetery? I have to read this like with the question form. Because he left the cemetery, the Nazirus starts. First, he has to become pure. Yeah, you're right. What it means is he left. They sprinkled on him. They sprinkled on him a second time, and he went to the mikveh, and then that's when it starts. Okay, so we left out some major details, but that's what it means. Gemara then continues. Gemara says, 1 second. When he leaves the cemetery and he goes back in, then it counts, and he has to bring the carbon for becoming impure. And also that becomes impure brings the carbon. So it's only when he leaves and he comes back in, that's when it counts. The Gemara asks. It should count just when he leaves and he becomes pure. That's when you start to recount the 30 days of Nazirus. Gemara answers, Laimi Bai Kamar. Means not only, which means Laimi Bai Yatsa, of course it starts counting when he leaves, Alafilu Nichnas, but even when he comes in immediately, it already is, you already count that as if he broke the Nazirus, even from one day back in. Even on the first day he enters back. As opposed to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that said that you have to wait 2 days for it to count.
If you give a carbon, you shave your head, and you go to
All
a
of that is
cemetery,
only
it
if
could be a
the
problem.
Nazirus was 2 days long and then he went in. But if the Nazirus was if he broke the Nazirus on the first day, then that
You could
doesn't.
specify to be a Nazir for 1 or 2 days.
No, he's the Nazir for 30 days.
Oh.
But if he messes it up on the first day, according to Rabbi Eliezer, you don't bring the sacrifice.
Oh, the first day.
Yeah. Only on the second day. I'm going to see some details in that in a moment. But
Doesn't it say that he would take the sacrifice even if he never became pure? Because if he walked out like the purification of 7 days.
so he walks out, purification 7 days, and then the Nazirus starts. You see, before, he doesn't have to bring the sacrifice because he never really started the Nazirus because he accepted on it when he was Tameh. Then when he goes out and comes back in, then he needs to bring that sacrifice. The Nazirus started because he became pure. Going out means that you have to add in the details, and he became pure. Then he goes back in. Problem is that it should have divided this up. It should have said, when he goes out, the Nazirus starts. When he goes back in to the cemetery, then he has to bring the carbon. But it doesn't do that. It says he goes out and goes back in, the Nazirus starts and he brings the carbon. It only starts if he goes back into the cemetery. No, it's coming to tell me that it does start even though he went back into the cemetery, even though it was so quick. Rav Kana v'Ravasi l'Rav. Very interesting statement here. Rav Kana Ravasi say to Rav, "My time alay mefarshes len kalein mili. How come you don't teach us the way Shmuel taught? Shmuel explained it. That he went out, they became pure. It was like politics amongst the yeshivas. Which yeshiva is better? Amalahain, he says to them, Amina Dilma Leitzrichisa. I thought that you don't need that explanation. I thought you would figure that out on your own.
Whoa.
He had great respect for Rav Kana, Ravasi. Okay. Rabbi Lezer Reimer, Loi Bay Bayim, Shnemar Vayam Rishon Yiplad Sheyam Rishon. We mentioned that Rabbi Lezer holds that the first day that he's a Nazir, because he became pure, then he goes back into the cemetery. That doesn't count. It has to be 2 days later that he goes back into the cemetery. Then that would count, and then he would be able to bring. Then he would be required to bring the karban wine, because the first day can't say Bahayamim Harishanim Yiplu, that the original days fell off, because it wasn't days, it was only 1 day. In order to be required to bring the sacrifice, it has to be more than 1 day. So Amar Ula explains Rabbi Lezer. It's very interesting. The case that this came up in, where Rabbi Lezer tells us this, is a case where he accepted on himself to be a Nazir while he was Tamei. And then he becomes pure. And then 2 days go by, and then he goes back in, and Rabbi Lezer says he'll have to bring the sacrifice. Let's say he accepted on himself to be a Nazir when he was pure. And he doesn't have 2 days go by, just 1 day. On the first day that he accepted on himself, he already becomes Tamei. But Rabbi Lezer say that doesn't count. So from the wording of the pasuk, Yamim Harishainim Yiplu, the first days fall off, which really shouldn't matter. In both instances, Rabbi Lezer would say, shouldn't have to bring the sacrifice, because he doesn't have days there that are falling off. He only has a day that's falling off, right? Singular, doesn't have days. But comes along Ula and says that no, Rabbi Lezer's din was only if he was Tamei before he took on the Nazirus. Then he has to become pure. And then after 2 days, that's when, after becoming pure, that's when we say that it's only 2 days and not 1 day. But if he would have become a Nazir when he was pure, and then he becomes Tamei, even if it's on the first day, he already has to bring the Karbanos. This is Ula's Chiddush, and what Rabbi Elazar's opinion is. Amar Rava. Rava says, according to Ula, my time with Rabbi Elazar, where does he get this from? I understood before, Vayamim Rishonim Yiplu, that the days fall off. But where does he get this from? That it doesn't have to be, that it's only if he was Tamei first, and then he becomes pure. My time with Rabbi Elazar, what's the reason for Rabbi Elazar? Amakra ki Tamei. Nizri, you want to go on the roof?
It's February.
You did the front engine.
Yeah, it must have been beautiful.
We could watch.
I had a plate full of people fly right in because of the wind.
So he says, Kitame Nizrai. The explanation over here is that because his Nazirus, the days fall off. How do they translate it there? Tame Nizrai. It's because he became a Nazir while he was Tame. That's the way Rav is reading the pasuk.
Consecration was ritually pure.
Right. It was ritually impure when he even became a Nazir. And that's when we say that it's one pasuk. The days of Nazirus, the first days fall off because Tamei Nizrai, because when he became a Nazir, he was Tamei. The way he's reading it, Rav is reading it, is when before he became a Nazir, he was already Tamei. That's where Rav is explaining Ula's comment on Rabbi Eliezer. Mishum de betum nazar. Specifically because he became tummy while he was a nazar. He became a nazar while he was tummy. Became a nazar while he was tummy. Okay. It's Rava's explanation. Esrei Abaya. Abaya has a question. Abaya has a question on Rava. Areni nazar meya yom. Someone is a nazar for 100 days. He's quoting a brisa. Benitma betchilas meya. He becomes tamei right away at the beginning of the 100 days. Maybe that should break the Nazirus, which means that he would have to bring the sacrifices. First days fall off. Still, he has days, not one day. Now, right away, we already see Abaya's question, because here he says he becomes a Nazir for 100 days, and immediately he becomes Tamei. That means he wasn't Tamei beforehand, became Tamei afterwards. And nevertheless, you still need 2 days for this to be required, two pure days to be required to bring the sacrifices that you broke the Nazirus. And according to Ula, the way Ula explained Rabbi Eliezer, you don't need 2 days. You only needed 2 days if you started off Tamei, and then you became a Nazir, and then you became pure, and then you go back to being Tamei. That over there you need 2 days. That was Ula's explanation, Rabbi Eliezer. But here we see that that's not required. Right? That's not the way that it has to be. Even if it's 2 days initially, it's also the same halacha. Right? He doesn't have to bring the carbon. It says maybe it breaks it up. I just want to add one point. I've been explaining this always with the sacrifice. Do you have to bring the sacrifice for becoming tamei or not? But the truth is, there is one more detail here that that the initial counting actually remains. So in other words, if he had 1 day beforehand, then he becomes tamei. According to Rabbi Eliezer, he doesn't have to bring the sacrifice, and he also doesn't drop that first day. He only has 29 days left. There's one more detail. Usually you need to have 30 days of Nazirus, but that's only if you break the Nazirus in a way that you need to bring the sacrifice. But if you don't need to bring the sacrifices because it was only 1 day, then that day is still counted. It doesn't break it. You can still count that day. A little complication. Okay. This one doesn't have days before it became tamei. Next case. Nitma b'seif meya. Remember, he accepted himself to be a nazir for 100 days. First case was he became tamei on day 1. Second case is he becomes tamei on day 100. You know who has worse luck?
Does it ever discuss a situation in which a person loses count how many days he's been in Nazir?
Yeah, we didn't come across it yet, but I think there's a mission about that.
So the only situation where you don't lose the day if it's 1 day,
Right.
because 2 or more, you have
Right.
to at least 35.
Right. And even that, the only time where you really have 2 or more, no, the only time you can count the first day, according to Ula, would be if he was tamei before he started. Then he accepts on himself to be a nazir, and then he becomes pure. And then he becomes tamei on the first day. Then we say that day still remains for afterwards. But if he starts the Nazirus according to Ula, he starts the Nazirus pure, then even the first day gets lost. But we're seeing from this brisa differently, saying that even the first day does not get lost. Okay, now he becomes tamei on the 100th day. Yachal Yesaiser, maybe that should also knock away the whole Nazirus. Talmud Laimar vayam rishenim yiplu, that the first days fall off. That tells me machlal dekachreinim. The first days fall off. That means that you have later days. But over here, he doesn't have b'zein le'achreinim. He doesn't have any later days. We say on the last day, the last day doesn't knock off the whole Nazirus that he has to restart. He doesn't have to restart it. Tesis points out that He doesn't have to restart the whole Naziris, but he still has to count 30 days. That was, okay, but he doesn't have to restart the whole Naziris. Let's say it was day 99.
Maybe also hot water. Hot water, not hot room. Cools you down. 1 degree cold, icy. Hot cooling down. You think laser like that?
Thank you. Okay. Since there's no other day, but let's say he gets tummy on the day 99. So maybe that should not break the Naziris that he should have to recount. This is a perfect case of where the Naziris gets broken and he has to recount. Day 99. He has days beforehand, 99 days before. He has 1 day after, perfect. And he has to recount all 100 days after he becomes pure. Gemara says, you can't tell me that this case was talking about that he was tamei before he started, and then he accepted on himself to be a nazir, and then he becomes pure, and then he waits 1 or 2 days. That's not what it's talking about. Why? Midiktani, because the Brisa taught, Hareini nazir meya, v'nitma b'tchilas meya. If he accepted on himself to be a nazir for 100 days, and then he became tamei. Not that he was tamei before. See? Uktani, adshila yam rishainim. And we say you need to have 2 days beforehand. Tiyufta, this is a very strong question on Ula's explanation of Rabbi Eliezer. We quoted a brisa that says that if someone was accepted on himself to be nazir for 100 days, then he becomes tamei on the first day. So he doesn't have to recount that first day. He doesn't have to bring the karbanos because he didn't have 2 days. It says by Yomim Harishanim Yiplu, the first days fall off. He doesn't have days, he only had day. Now, Ula explained that this doesn't apply to someone that was tahar, that accepted on himself to be a nazir. Ula explained that it only applies to someone that was tamei, that accepted on himself to be a nazir. Then he goes through the purification process. Then he starts counting and he becomes tamei on the first day. We say that he doesn't have to bring the sacrifice because it wasn't 2 days. It was only 1 day. But if he would have been tahar at the beginning, then he would have to bring the sacrifice. He would have to bring the sacrifice. That's Ula's explanation. And the Brisa, you see that even if he's tahar at the beginning, you don't have to bring the sacrifice. Even if he's tahar at the beginning, you do not need to bring the sacrifice.
How does this agree or disagree with what we learned when the guy was in the cemetery and said, I want to be a Nazir?
Right.
Because it sounds similar, but I'm not sure that's the same.
Yeah. Over there, when what we learned over there, if someone's tamei and he says, I'm going to be a nazir, so then the Naziris only starts when he becomes pure. Rabbi Eliezer added on to that even when you say the Nazir starts when he becomes pure, if you want to go into the rules of when he becomes tamei, it can only be after he becomes pure, and 2 days later he becomes tamei. That's when it will have all those rules of becoming tamei.
So
It's exactly that case. Amalei Rav Papa la Abaya. Papa says to Abaya, Rav Papa is a student of Abaya. Here we had Rava explaining Ula, Abaya questioning Rava, and now Rav Papa telling Abaya. Halein Yamim, Rav Papa has a question. Halein Yamim de Kamrinan. When you said that 2 days, are you talking about Nafak Chada Maschilin Train? Are you talking about 1 day, 1 complete day that begins the second day? A Dilma, the Nafkin Train, Maschilin Plus, or maybe it's 2 full days and it's beginning the 3rd day. What do you mean Yamim? Days? You mean 1 day plus, or do you mean 2 days plus? Yamim means days.
Me also means like times.
Oh, well, actually, it would probably be from 12 o'clock to 12 o'clock. It wouldn't be like morning to night. It would be days, lace time. But what would be, do you have to have 24 hours plus, but do you have to have 48 hours plus? That's Papa's question. According to Rabbi Eliezer, that says that you need to have this days, which I think you notice the halachas like Rabbi Eliezer, that it needs to be 2 days. So what is the 2 days? Well, he asked Abai this question. He didn't have an answer. This is the second time that we have this sort of politics. Remember Rav Kana and Rav Asi? They told Rav that how come you don't teach the way Shmuel taught? He said, I thought you didn't need it. Anyway, here we have Rav Papa asking Abai. He doesn't know now, so he goes to the what's it called? The competing yeshiva.
RJJ.
What is that? We understood more than one. Right. Right. That's what he's asking. When it says days, do you mean 2 or do you mean more than 1? Do you mean 2 plus or do you mean 1 plus? So now this does not help us much because now the commentaries argue what Rava means. But one opinion here says Yipluksiv means that it's anything that falls off. That means even if it's 1 plus. Other commentary says no. Yiplu means plural. It means 2 plus. Anyway, we have a machlekes rishonim. Let's take the 1 plus. Now Yamim means days, and Yiplu means that it falls off. The ikas of Rachmana Yamim, if it would only say Yamim, the days, because of Yiplu, it didn't say that it fell off. Havamina, the Nafkin train violent plus, I would have thought that you need to have 2 days complete. And going into the 3rd day, because of Rachmana Yiplu, so the pasuk says Yiplu, that means anything that falls off is already good as long as it's a day. The ikas of Rachmana Yiplu, if it would only say Yiplu, because of Yamim, but it didn't say days, Havamina filuchad. We could have thought even 1 day would be enough. So I need to know. Now I have 2 days, which means that it's not 2 complete days, but it's 1 day plus a little bit. That's the way I saw it in Taisvis, and I saw the other commentaries say differently that it needs to be 2 days. Okay. Next Mishnah. Bless you. Now we're learning that it's 24 hours plus a little bit is already considered days. You're in your 2nd day. That was less than a day, which meant it wasn't even 24 hours. It's until nightfall, I think. Yeah, here we're not dealing with nightfall. Here in 24. Misha Nazar Naziris Harbe. Someone that accepted on himself many Naziris. The Hishlamis Nazirus, he was a good boy, finished everything. Then he comes to the land of Israel. He really, outside of Israel, he really was not supposed to be a Nazir anyway, because the land outside Israel is impure. So the rule is, Bishami Amram Nazir Shleishim Yom. Bishami says, we make you, when you reach Israel, we make you become a Nazir again for 30 days. Bisil says Nazir Betchila, that not just 30 days, but whatever you accepted outside of Israel, you have to redo entirely, and you have to redo the whole thing. You ready? Maisa Behilni Amalka, it's a story with Queen Helene. She was a queen that converted. I think she was like in the Turkey area, Adiyabain or something. Where were the Parthians? No, this is not Helen. But the same name, Helene is Helen, of course. Sorry?
Where she was from.
Oh, it's Syria? Uh-huh. So she converted, and I believe her son was Munbaz her son. Is that Munbaz was her son? Munbaz and Pizatz converted to Judaism. Queen Helene is a righteous proselyte who accepted upon herself all elements of halacha as taught to her by the sages. That's a quote from the Mishnah in Sukkah, in the Gemara in Sukkah. It says that she followed everything the sages said.
So where was she from?
Bronx.
Bronx.
No, where was she? It said north of Syria.
Now it's north and south.
Where north of Syria? It's a big place north of Syria. The whole Roman Empire. It's Jordan.
When you
He has a famous tomb.
yeah, right when you
Very
enter
famous
into the old
building at the base of Barzazim.
base of Arazim, I thought when you enter into the old city, or right outside or something, there's a tomb over there. Maybe
I might
we
have
can
it.
see it. I just remember them showing it to me at the gate.
Yeah.
You see this tomb. This is Queen Helene. Now I think it's the same one. Assume it's the same one.
How many Queen Helenes?
I don't know. So what happened was Hilni Amalka Shahalach ben Olam Milchama. Her son went to battle. V'amra, she said, Im Yavi benim min Milchama b'shalom. If my son comes back in peace, a Nazira Sheva Shanim, I'll be a Nazir for 7 years. Someone gave me a book, a novel called Nazira, and it's a historical novel based on. I didn't really get into it because I have to try it again. Try to read it again. But it's called Nazira. It's about Helene. So apparently it was researched well. So she's going to be a Nazira for 7 years. And her son came back from battle, and she was she became a Nazir for 7 years. The Seif Sheva Shanim also after 7 years, she decided that's not enough. She's now moving to Israel. She goes to Israel. Beis Hillel followed the rule. They're teaching. She had to be a Nazira for another 7 years. At the end of the 7 years, she became Tameh. Nimtzas Nazira Estrim va'achas Shana. Comes out, she was a Nazira for 21 years. 7 outside of Israel, 7 in Israel, and then it broke in Israel because she became Tameh. She had to do it again. It's 21 years she's in Nazira.
Why did they say that? Why did they make it?
Because of the Tumah outside of Israel, they said that it doesn't count.
Just like
Right.
Why did she have to take the whole 7 again?
Fun.
If we learned that she would have to do 30.
Yeah, so if it was on the very last day, then it would be 30 days. Ishami says it when she comes to Israel, she only has to do 30 days. Beis Hillel said she has to do over everything. So she asked Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel told her she has to redo everything.
But in order for her, she would have, in order for her to do 14 in Israel, she would have had to do the first 7.
She did the
Violate
first 7
last
according,
day.
right? Not the last day, but probably the day before the last day.
Oh, so
And then it was, then she had to redo the whole 7.
So Rabbanim that hold nowadays, when there's no place in Mikdash, if the person who goes to Nazir is outside Yisrael, the Nazir Olam, because there's no way they could stop. How do they make the statement out to Beis Hillel that they're a Nazir? According to Beis Hillel, they can't be a Nazir.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would Beis Hillel answer there?
I don't know if what Beis Hillel is saying is that they weren't supposed to be a Nazir at all outside of Israel. I think they shouldn't have accepted on themselves to be a Nazir outside of Israel, but they still have to be a Nazir. And then, but it's when they come to Israel, it's considered like it didn't count. It's not,
But you could rely on the idea we've had that you can't accept Naziris when you're in a state of Tameh, and it's assumed that you're Tameh outside of Israel.
that's another point, right?
I don't know if that's still a good assumption.
Let's take a look at the Gemara. We'll see. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Lo yhaisa Nazira ala arba shana." She was only in Nazira for 14 years. Rabbi Yehuda says.
7 outside of that.
Well, it's unclear what Rabbi Yehuda means. The Gemara is going to ask, what does Rabbi Yehuda mean? Does he mean that she followed Beis Shammai and she was a Nazir for 7 years, and then a month she became Tameh? She had to redo 7 years because she became Tameh after a month, or she's following Beis Hillel and she didn't become Tameh? 7 outside, 7 in, and the whole Tameh story was just added detail that never happened. Shammai says 30 days. But if you break it, those 30 days is the whole 7 years, all in this composite. And if you break that, then you have to redo the 7 years. So that's a possibility. Okay, Ketani Reisha, B'Shamai Yom Nazir Shleishim Yom, B'Sil Yom Nazir B'Tchila. Shammai says that the Nazir for 30 days. B'Sil says an entire Nazirus again when you reach Israel. Let's say that this is the Machlekes. B'Shamai Sabri Yeretz Amim Mishum Gusha. But what's the issue in the land of the nations? That's because of the earth, the soil itself. Mishum Gusha Gazrola. Not because of the airspace. It's not a real strong Tumah. It's a weaker Tumah, the land of Israel. It's only the land that's Tumah, not the air that's Tumah. Because it's a weaker sort of Tumah, they said, okay, you weren't supposed to do it, but you only have to redo 30 days. Bisil Savri Mishum Avir, Bisil is much more strict. It says that the land outside of Israel is so Tumah that even the airspace is Tumah. So Mishum Avir Gazrila. The Gemara says, like, no, that's not the case. By the way, this Gemara there's another version to that. It's exactly the opposite, and it's still able to explain it. Like the Kuli Alma, everyone holds Mishum Gusha Gazrila. Everyone holds because of the earth. And Beishamai Savri Bestam Nazir's Kansinan. Beishamai says that we make a knas. You see, it's not a real halacha over here that the Nazirus doesn't work. It's just a knas. You weren't supposed to accept Nazirus outside of Israel. To make a fine, and you have to redo 1 month. Beisil Sabri Ki Kansin Betchilos Nazirus. No, you put a fine on the person for doing this. It's a knas. You have to redo the whole thing. It's interesting that Beishamai is more lenient here about the fine. A little bit odd. Is this a Mishnah in Idias? Yeah, it's in Idias. Because in Idias they quote over there the Mishnayos that Beishamai is more lenient than Beisil. This would be one of them. Yeah, there's a few cases like this. Okay, now the Gemara asks the question that you mentioned, Hillel. Maisa behilni amalka chulu. There's a story with Hilni, chulu, etc. Now, here's a great example of whenever the Gemara quotes the Mishnah and it says v'chulu, etc. So you have to go back and read the Mishnah. Otherwise, you're not going to know what's happening. Because here, the quote that's quoted has nothing to do with the following Gemara. It's all in the etc.
Oh.
Everything that we're going to be discussing is all in that etc. Yeah, for yeshiva students that are trying to learn Gemara, this is a real turnoff because they can't figure out what is going on here. They read what the Gemara quotes, and then they read the Gemara. The question the Gemara asks has nothing to do with, and because they missed when it says etc. You have to go back and see what it says in that etc. Like what was it referring. So over here it says a story with Hilni Amalka. ... Right? And then it says that Rabbi Yehuda says that it was only 14 years. Now the Gemara says, they had a question, those 14 years that Rabbi Yehuda mentioned, is that when she become Tameh? And it's following Beishamai's view. We said that if she messes up those 30 days, that's a big 30 days. She has to restart the whole 7 years. Or maybe, but she didn't become Tameh, and Rabbi Yehuda is just saying that she had to restart the whole count like Beis Hillel holds, that you have to redo it. Tashima, so come and listen. Also, she comes up to the land, and Beis Hillel says that she has to count 7 years. If you're going to say that Rabbi Yehuda was following Beisham, that saying that she asked Beishamai, and she was Tamei, it should have been 14 years and 30 days. If it's because she became Tamei. 29. Right? So, Tanya Nami Hachi, we also have a brisa that supports this. Rabbi Yudam Mishum Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Yudam says, name Rabbi Lezer, Damakra, Zaysteris Nazir, Hatayra Amra, Kinitma, Biyoim Malay, Stain Light Tayras Nazir. Well, the huge problem. Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rabbi Elias, that says that if someone becomes Tamei, instead of redoing the whole Nazirus, if it was 100-day Nazirus or a 7-year Nazirus, when they become Tamei, they have to bring the sacrifices. They don't have to redo. They don't have to, if it's on the last day. If it's on the last day, they don't have to if it's on the last day, like we mentioned, if it's on the last day, they don't have to redo the whole Naziris. They only have to do a Naziris of 30 days. So if it's following Beis Shammai, and if it's following Beis Shammai, and she became Tameh, she anyways wouldn't need to redo 7 years. She would only have to redo 30 days anyway. Because if it was, she kept 30 days and she becomes Tameh at the end of 30 days. So she would only need to do 30-day Naziris. What happened if she became Tameh on before that? Maybe she would have to do all 7. The Gemara is trying to bring a proof that it can't be that it's talking about Beis Shammai and she became Tameh. It has to be where it's following Beis Hillel and there was no Tameh here at all. Because if there would have been Tameh, it would only be a 30-day period. It wouldn't be a 7-year period. Yeah.
So the time of Mashiach, we follow Beis Hillel. Are there circumstances where they follow Beis Shammai?
Yeah. There are 6 cases that Taisa says in Sukkah that we follow Beis Shammai.
Like just down tell you after this year.
Yeah, the Gemara is assuming that she became tummy on the last day of the 30. That's what the assumption here is. Question is that really it could have been not the last day, and then maybe she'd have to redo all 7. I don't know.
The
Okay.
6 cases that we follow Beis Shammai, is that where Beis Shammai holds Kula?
No, not
Not
necessarily.
necessarily.
No, the Taisa says that he quotes from Rabbi Amram Goyen or something. And so,
Oh,
like
so
the
it's
beginning of
not the
Sukkah.
same cases that
No.
discussed in the Gemara you
No.
mentioned before.
No.
Before we go to the next Mishnah, I have a question about what was mentioned in passing, that the acceptance of the Naziros in and of itself is a chait.
Right.
It seems to me like that's a big deal. You mentioned just in passing.
Right.
Remember when we were learning in Daring, waited all the way till Cup Base to learn that this is not a good idea.
Yeah.
Right.
It seems like that would have been also the place to say, and by the way, it's not just not a good idea, it's also an avera.
Right.
Yeah.
And here we go all the way till Daf Test
Yeah.
together.
Mhm.
It's a lot more than just not a good idea now.
Right.
So the point of this.
So I
It's a
know.
machlokes. It's a machlokes.
Take you.
Taco.
Take out.
Take out.
Take it out.
Okay. It just lets you know that it's highly complex.
Maybe it's not because if it were really an avera, you'd overrun a lot and you'd have malchus, right? We don't have malchus here.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it's not.
Right.
At the same time, we had, some of our,
Right.
they weren't.
Since the Eitz Hadas, this has been a complicated subject.
Out of Makava, taking them to
No.
the header.
No, because the question of how involved in Gashmias we're supposed to be was all this confusion from the Eitz Hadas. Can we rectify the world, or are we going to mess it up with indulgences and stuff? That's the question of it.
Isn't that?
And it could have been Eitz Hadas was great, but it's one opinion.
Isn't that what part of being Rabin is about?
Being
Being Rabin,
right.
that we always
Right,
have
this whole
struggle.
conflict. That's the basic idea of it. Is it a good thing or is it? Okay. To balance this out. Yeah, you're not supposed to separate yourself from the world. You're supposed to be involved in the world, but then to what extent? On Shabbos you can indulge if all week you didn't indulge. You can say like all week you indulge, and then on Shabbos, now I'm even
That's
allowed. What is that?
Depends where your mind is.
Depends where your mind is, right? So we ask for Gashmias by Shemon Esrei, which is a world of Atzilus. Why don't we ask for Gashmias in the lower world? All the requests that we have. It's all in the highest level of davening in Shemona Esrei. Because you can only ask when your mindset, when your frame of mind is like perfect, then you can ask. Gosh, the
Whoa.
lower world would have been corruption. Okay. Misha Yishteki to Edim Meidus, I say. Someone that has two groups of Edim that are telling him what he said. What's going on with him? Witnesses. What's going on with him? He either is denying, or he doesn't know, or he doesn't remember, and people are telling him what he said. So one group says, doesn't know who to trust. One group, one group says, of witnesses say that I was there, you vowed 2 sets of Nazirs, which means 2 times 30. Another group says you Nazir Chamish, that you vowed 5. It sounds like auctioning aliyahs.
Yeah.
Bishame said they're arguing. Obviously, we can't trust either of them, so there's nothing there. 1 second. They both agree that he took a nazir for 2. It's either 3 more, or if it's just 2. So she ain't nazir time, so it's nazir for 2, because both groups they agree to the 2 part. They just is there an addition. Bishame says that no, that's not considered agreeing. Okay.
Have we learned that the Jewish requires Edim?
No, it doesn't require this. The person should know on his own. But here we're talking about where, for whatever reason, he doesn't know. Yeah, I don't know if that counts. I don't know. If someone makes a nether when he's drunk, does that count? I don't know if it counts.
Ooh, I'll take a case.
Do people ever say that when someone wrote a will when he was drunk? They say they definitely say he wrote the will and he was senile. That
Right,
must
so
be
maybe-
very common.
So it could be if he was really drunk.
Wait, just go back a few months when we said that they were mashka a woman a drink, and they said, I want to be a Nazir. If it was more than 1 drink, the Nazir was still Chal. If it was 1 drink, it was Chal. In other words, the implication is that if they were drunk, to me, the implication was they were drunk. There is no
What did we say? That more than 1 drink?
because they want to make her drunk. So that's because people love to watch you drunk, something like that.
I don't like.
You all look at me.
Muscular
what
case.
was that?
Pretty drunk.
I probably was listening on Zoom.
And that wasn't because she was drunk. They poured her a cup of wine and she said, I'm a nazir from this cup. Question is she an entire nazir, or did she just mean that she's not drinking this cup? Then there was a story of a lady that was drunk and they poured her a cup of wine. She says, I'm not drinking anymore. The sages said that she's considered a nazir. She's not considered a nazir because she only meant to say that I can't drink anymore. That might mean that she could be a nazir when she's drunk. She could have been a nazir. That's just not what she meant. Right? Sounds like it could be that it would work. Yeah. Okay. It is a good proof.
Exactly.
It's a good proof. Okay. Masnisin Blake Haitana. Our Mishnah does not fit with the following author of the Brisa. The Tanya was taught in a Brisa. Rabbi Shmuel ben Yishmael, Rabbi Yechon ben Bereika, Omer leinachliku b'sham beisel al shtei kitiyei tamachas emer shtayim bachas emer chamesh yesh b'chal chamesh shtayim. If there were 2 groups, which means a total of 4 people, 2 of them said 2, 2 of them said 5 sets of Nazirs. Everyone agrees that he's going to be a Nazir for 2. So what was the machlekes? There's only 2 people in total. One of them says 5 and one of them says 2. So now we don't even have one group of witnesses that really have any substance yet. Bishami says you don't have any witnesses here. They're divided even amongst themselves. They're not divided. You still have 2 people. You still have 2 people that agreed to 2. They're just arguing about 3, 4, 5.
So we can go with the 2.
So it would go with according to Beis Hillel, it would be 2. But what Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka, Rabbi Shmuel ben Eshel Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka is saying is that Beis Shammai would even agree if there were 4 people here saying. It's only when there's only 2 people here that Beis Shammai argues. That's what he's adding in. Now, our Mishnah doesn't fit with Rabbi Shmuel ben Eshel Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka, because our Mishnah says that even when there's 4 people, Beis Shammai still has this view that that the whole testimony is nullified. There's no testimony here. Amar Rav. Rav says, Hakol Maidim, everyone agrees. The minor. It's not a complicated piece of Gemara here because of the different versions and what it means. Let's take it like this. Everyone agrees when there's one group and they counted it out. Amle Rav Chamle Rav Chisda, my kamar, what are you saying? What does Rav mean? When he counts it, what do you mean he counts it? He says 5 and not 2. One says 2 and not 5. So then what do you mean they agree? They're actually, no. Then it's so obvious that it's so obvious that there's nothing here because they're arguing. This one said clearly not 2, and this one said it was yes 2. Ella, rather, so one of the ways of reading this is that, so why do I need Rav to say that Hakol Maidim b'Mayna, that everyone would agree that it doesn't work? It's so obvious. One says 1 and 2. One of the witnesses said 1, 2. He's like counting it out. I'll be a Nazir 1 and 2 times. Other one says 3, 4, 5. I'll be a Nazir 3, 4, 5. Now, no one's saying that you have to add up 3 plus 4 plus 5. Just saying that he was counting out how many Nazirs, probably like this. 3, 4, 5, probably that's what. So the Gemara says, hold on, Amali. Why? So what are we saying? That everyone agrees that they're not arguing. No, everyone agrees that they are arguing. And because the fact that the person didn't say 1, 2, and he starts, no, he's saying that's not 1 and 2, it's only 3, 4, 5. So then why do I need Rav to tell me that everyone would agree? So I've dropped the word Rav. They take it out from the Tosfos takes it out. Maybe he's only saying 3, 4, 5, but he's not saying 1 and 2 because that's included. 1 and 2, and they're not arguing. So Rav is telling me that no, they are arguing. Amri b'Marava, they said in the West, which is Eretz Yisrael, Einach Chasha b'Mayna, that when he counts it out, it's not considered arguing, the disagreement, and it's actually considered that they are agreeing to the lesser number. That's how the concludes here. Hadran Alach Mishamar. That's the 3rd parak of Nazir. Let's start the next Mishnah. Mishamarini Nazir. Someone accepts on himself, says, I'm going to be a Nazir. Shama Chaveri, we quoted this in passing. Shama Chaveri, his friend hears him saying that. Amar Vani says, me too. And then there was a 3rd friend there that says, Vani. Says, I'm also going to join. So Kulam Nazirim, they're all considered Nazirim. Everyone that said, me too. Putter Arishan, let's say the first person annuls his Naziris. So because all of them were dependent on the first one, because they're only attaching themselves to the first one, it's like a chain, dominoes. So Hutter Rishon, Hutter Kulan, they all become annulled. Hutter Achran, let's say the last one annuls his vow. So Achran Mutter V'Kulam Masur. So the other ones aren't dependent on the last one, like in the dominoes.
Domino thing.
The last one fell over, but the first ones are still standing, right? Amar Reini Nazir Shama Chaver Ram Pika Piv Sari Kasari. Someone says, I'm going to be a Nazir. His friend hears it, says, my mouth is like his mouth, my hair is like his hair. Harez a Nazir. That basically he said he's going to be a Nazir. Okay, now here's really interesting cases. Hareini Nazir. Someone says, I'm going to be a Nazir. The Shama Ishtai, his wife hears, Vamra Vani, me too.
That's we're assuming she gives them meat, I'm gonna kill you.
So, Meiferes Shalah
She said-
v'Shalai
she
Kayam,
said,
and I.
Yeah.
So Meiferes Shalah, he can still annul hers, and he can't annul his own, because the husband can annul his wife's
Right.
vow. Let's take a look at the other way. Hareini Nazir v'Shem Abayla v'Amar v'Ani. Let's say she said, I'm going to be a Nazir, and the husband says, and I, me too. Now, Eni Achalafer, you can't annul hers. Why? Now, this is very interesting. There's two possibilities. One possibility is that the husband, when he annuls a vow, he's removing it from the very beginning. He's retroactively removing it. If that's the case, that he's retroactively removing the vow, then we have a rule that he can only annul his wife's vow, but not his vow. La yachal devari, he can't then remove his own vow. And by removing his wife's vow, it ends up removing his vow. That's one possibility. That's why he can't. The other possibility is no, the husband never retroactively removes the vow. Even if he takes off his wife's vow, his vow is still standing. Why? Because he only cuts the vow from here and on. But he accepted based on her original vow. And so his vow would still stand. So that's not the problem. Why can't he annul the vow? Because we're saying that when he says me too, he's agreeing to her vow, being Mekayim. Hareini Nazir. Va'at. I'm going to be a Nazir, the husband says, and you too. V'amra amin. And she says, okay. Mefer Shalah v'Shalai Kayim. He can still annul hers, even though he suggested it, but he can still annul hers. And his vow is still standing. Hareini Nazir va'ata. Let's say she says, I'm going to be a Nazir plus, and you'll also. V'amar amin, and he agreed. So Eni Achalafer, he can't annul it. Can annul it probably because when he agrees, he's accepting her vow as well. Okay, let's leave it over here.
Wow. Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a great day. Shkoyach.
We did that, right?